All right, Trial Tuesday once again. Today we're unraveling the murder of a 5-year-old Berkeley County boy. It's a 25-year-old cold case that could soon be solved thanks to a new lead. Attorney David Aylor joins us to discuss. Counselor, welcome back to the program. Let's talk about this. They just found that new lead. It could be the key that we're waiting for 25 years to finally bring this family some closure.
Yeah, essentially from when the case was actually being investigated back in 1989, there was a tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence, at least from the standpoint of the Berkeley County Department that went and actually did most of the investigation. And that pointed towards the stepmother at the time, at least to some degree. Now, we saw that more when the coroner actually decided on their own to go ahead and do an inquest. That led to the arrest of the stepmother. However, those charges were dropped because a lot of the evidence was things that would not be able to be presented in a courtroom.
Well, let's talk about a cold case and how difficult it is to keep something open like this for 25 years. Do detectives and police officials, do they routinely go back over these cold cases? And how often would you say they do that, and kind of what can lead them to reopen it?
Well, you know, in reality, the case is never closed. It may be considered inactive because, you know, the different leads that they've tried to look at have since gone, you know, dry. There's really nothing left for them to do, or at least it appears that way. But in some departments, you have cold case units that actually come in at certain periods of time and look at these older cases. Yeah. However, in this situation, while the case was still open, it appears, and this is only from reading the reports, that it was actually some tips, some new information that came out for the case that really brought it back to light. A lot of the people involved have passed away or are no longer around in regards to the family and the friends of the victim. However, you do still have some people that were concerned, understandably, that some sort of resolution come to it. But the investigator that originally was involved in the case is still in the area. However, he is no longer an officer. He's actually a bondsman.
Oh, how about that? Let's talk about statute of limitations, because we know that that is an important thing when going to trial. Not such a thing when you're talking about murder charges, though,
No,
correct?
there would be no statute of limitations. The problem in sometimes these cold cases or older cases is even when you have new evidence, there are other evidence that maybe you had back then that are now gone. People move, people forget things. Obviously, people pass away. We're talking about a quarter of a century here. So it'll be interesting to see what exactly from the case that they had prior. And if you heard some of the reports that came across the media, Deputy Wren, who had done the investigation at the time, felt like that they knew exactly who did it, and they had a lot of circumstantial evidence. Yeah. They just couldn't put it all together, and it seemed to appear that the coroner's inquest, which is an interesting process we've talked about in and of itself, may have damaged the case.
Well, let's talk about that inquest a little bit, because it's basically another autopsy. You kind of go back and review what she already said, but you kind of go a little bit more in depth. Is that how it works?
And you do it within a court proceeding, and in South Carolina it is legal, and it's a process where the coroner comes in and can subpoena people to come and testify, and they can look at different things. However, the normal evidence rules do not apply, and there's a lot of things that come in from a criminal procedure standpoint that would never come into a normal trial or be a part of a normal investigation. So a lot of people look at it as being a somewhat tainted process. I myself have been involved in a case here locally with that and felt like it was very unfair to the client in regards to the civil rights they should have.
Well, let's talk about these cold cases as well, and that evidence. Is it stored in those, you know, kind of cardboard boxes in police stations and evidence rooms that we see in movies? Is that how it kind of works, and can that get tainted?
Some of it is. A lot of it, depending on the department, again, on how much technology they have, has moved over to digital and gone into computers. What's important, though, in some cold cases is whether or not they've preserved potential DNA evidence. Because you got to think, even back in this case, and I'm not to say that there is any DNA that they'd be testing, a lot of things would not have been available then that would be now. Right. So you do see some cases that come back up just because of the systems and the way that they can test DNA, not just locally, but nationally.
Certainly will be following that case for you here at ABC News 4. And David Aylor, thank you so much for your time, sir. We do appreciate your insight.
Thanks
as
for having me.
always. Much more Low Country Live up next. Stay with us.